money on infrastructure for electric vehicles in the U.S. And then Appendix D, which is the mitigation of excess emissions. There's roughly $19 million that's guaranteed to be spent in Vermont on mitigation projects. And the settlement, and that's what you have in front of you, sets forth how that money can be spent by the states. So to focus on Appendix D, which again you have the summary of electronically, there haven't been any proposals to use the funds from the trust yet because it is not yet effective. We are waiting for the federal court to appoint a trustee. We've heard that the court is close to appointing a trustee, and this will start the process of becoming a beneficiary and submitting a mitigation plan that explains how we plan to spend our trust allocation. So we'll provide updates as more information is available.
This trustee is for the whole country or just for Vermont?
For the whole country. So the purpose, again, of the Environmental Mitigation Trust is to fund eligible mitigation actions that replace mobile diesel emission sources with cleaner technology to mitigate the harm caused by the excess nitrogen oxides emitted by the affected vehicles.
Right. Out of that 19 million, about how much would go toward EV infrastructure?
Right now, I believe it's 15% has the potential if the states decide to go towards EV infrastructure. And that, again, would be in addition to Appendix C, which is money that VW is required to spend on EV infrastructure. So there'll be a lot of investments in infrastructure with this settlement. So the trust will be administered by an independent trustee who is appointed by the court, and they will approve the eligible projects by states. Excuse me. And beneficiaries will have 10 years to request their allocation and implement mitigation actions. So the Agency of Natural Resources Air Quality and Climate Division has extensive experience providing technical assistance and incentive funding for projects that reduce diesel emissions from engine vehicles and equipment in Vermont, with the goals of reducing public exposure to emissions from diesel-powered engines, as well as reducing risks to public health and the environment. During the development of the proposed settlement, the Agency of Natural Resources worked closely with the EPA and the U.S. Department of Justice to ensure that Vermont's emissions reductions priorities were considered in the settlement. And during the official comment period for the proposed consent decree, the Agency of Natural Resources coordinated comments on behalf of other state agency stakeholders regarding expansion of the list of eligible actions to better align with Vermont's inventory of eligible vehicles and equipment. And then the responsibility of the trust beneficiary will be to ensure that there are maximum NOx reductions with Vermont's allocated share of the mitigation trust fund. So again, that's the main goal of this money, is to mitigate the excess emissions of nitrogen oxides. So now we can go to the handout that you have on the eligible mitigation actions. You'll see there that eligible actions applicable to Vermont include, that's this. Oh, that's all right. They include repowering or replacing certain heavy-duty diesel trucks, buses, locomotives, and other certain vessels. Repowering and replacing certain forklifts and airport and ground support equipment, as well as installation of electric recharging infrastructure for light-duty zero-emission vehicles.
Is repower defined?
That's a good question. Yes, yes.
As just over, I mean, I'm sure it's technical, but is it a new
engine?
engine they're talking about?
Yes, essentially it means replacing the existing engine with a new engine, but keeping the rest of the body and the other components of the mobile source intact.
And for the record, could you just identify yourself?
Yes, I'm Megan O'Toole. I'm an attorney for the Air Quality and Climate Division at DEC.
Thank you.
But that would also be required to show emissions in NOx. And then vehicles or engines that are replaced must be scrapped to achieve the intended emission reduction. So the next section I have is just on how the eligible projects would be implemented. But before I get there, are there any questions on the table that we provided on the types of projects?
I just have a clarification question. I think that maybe we can go back before the table. Sorry, I'm going to have to work on it here. So, the $19 million, is that allocated to the states on some basis that then each state decides what to do with it, or is it some other way of allocating the money or in some process for approving what each state wants to do?
So there is a process, so that's actually, maybe I will get to my last section because that gets into the plan that we're required to go into. Yes.
Robin, and I believe you said this earlier, but I missed it. The 19 million is separate from EV fueling setup or infrastructure.
That's part. So there are two sources of potential funding for EV infrastructure. So of the 19 million, approximately 15% of that can be used towards that in Vermont. But in addition to that, as part of this partial settlement, there's Appendix C, which if you look at the whole document, that is where Volkswagen is required to spend approximately $2 billion on EV infrastructure in the United States. So that money is not guaranteed to be spent in Vermont, but it will be spent in the United States. And they're in the process of coming up with their plans. It's a multi-year plan for how that funding will be used. But as this money for the 19 million, that is money that is guaranteed to be spent in Vermont on projects that are deemed eligible to be spent. So following certification of a trust beneficiary, we'll develop and submit a beneficiary mitigation plan that details the intended uses of Vermont's allocated share of the mitigated trust. So this plan will explain the overall goal for the use of the trust funds. We'll identify the NOx reductions that are expected to be received and list the categories of eligible projects intended for implementation, as well as explain how benefits to air quality in communities with disproportionate air pollution burden will be considered. In developing the plan, we'll seek public input regarding the eligible potential uses of the mitigation fund, as well as the process for mitigation project selection. And the primary project selection criteria will be include the projected magnitude and cost effectiveness of the NOx reduction. So that is a key. We will be looking for cost-effective reductions in NOx with these projects as required by the settlement. An additional criteria will include project readiness, duration, and cost necessary to ensure effective and timely use of the mitigation trust funds. We anticipate that an application process would be developed for entities seeking funding for eligible projects, and grants will be awarded to successful applicants providing funding and identifying all the required terms and conditions for project completion. So that's what I have for a summary.
Lots of questions. It's one of those things where you get information, you're not sure what question it is you want to ask. Bob.
That was an excellent discussion.
Not having been a recent Volkswagen owner, what does the poor Volkswagen owner get out of this?
Well, that's related more to what we're not dealing with in the Agency of Natural Resources, but Volkswagen is working on a recall and a replacement process as well as some.
So that's not been settled yet then?
Yes, that has been settled. So that is in process where Volkswagen owners are now in the process of having their vehicles replaced if they're willing.
Yep.
So, being a settlement, I take it that we will be allocated X amount of money, and that means that you cannot enforce on any of our state air quality laws, right?
I'm going to defer to Megan.
Sure. So this settlement was actually a settlement between the federal government and Volkswagen, but this mitigation fund was created to directly benefit the states, even though the states were not a party to this settlement. And Vermont is not giving up any of its opportunities to sue Volkswagen for violations of Vermont state law in accepting this funding.
So we're not preempted by,
Yeah.
by the settlement?
Nope.
The amount's established at 19 million though.
Yep, and that's based on the amount of cars, affected vehicles registered in the state. So we had roughly 3,000 vehicles in Vermont that were affected by the scandal, and so it's a per car allocation. Other states that had much higher numbers of registered vehicles that were affected by the scandal are getting, substantially more money out of the mitigation trust. But Vermont was actually the second highest per capita state in terms of Volkswagen owners for these particular types of vehicles, right behind Oregon. So we're getting more than other smaller states.
And just to restate for surety, so the $19 million is part of the federal settlement,
Yes.
and we have not given up any rights that we might have to pursue something that would all be in addition to the 19 million.
That's correct. It's a very unique situation where it's a settlement, not where the state is a party, but a condition of the settlement directly benefits the states, and that's in keeping with the traditional structure of the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act is a law that's implemented by the states with oversight from the federal government, and this is similar.
Uh-huh. So have you pursued any enforcement, or are you anticipating?
You want that? Yeah, I think Heidi mentioned we sued Volkswagen in early September for violation of state law, and that is currently pending in the same court that is presiding over this partial settlement. So we sued with other states that have similar violations of state law.
Robin, looking at your lists here, the last one, 10, I'm disappointed to see that we have no ocean-going vessel settlement. This one, DARA option, can you explain a little bit about that? I tried to read it, but I'm not a lawyer.
So the DARA is an existing program where the states have been applying for funding to replace diesel engines with cleaner engines or vehicles. So we've been applying for and receiving maybe approximately $150,000 a year to replace and repower vehicles under DARA. So that's the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act option. This was something that was added. More towards the end, and so my understanding of this is that states, if they choose, can use some of this money to add to their DARA programs already that they have in place. That would be smaller to focus on those types of diesel engines that qualify. I'm not reading this.
What does DERA stand for again?
It's Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, I believe. So that's money that's been authorized by Congress over the past several years for states to apply for to replace and repower vehicles. And this has a requirement that these vehicles in this program, that they need to also demonstrate that they were not going to be replaced without this program being in place, so really trying to maximize the emissions.
Mike, did you have another answer or another question?
No.
Okay, Aaron, please.
Thank you. I guess I'm wondering, maybe it went over my head, maybe the committee gets it and I don't, but how much money is available to Vermont? How do we get it?
So approximately
What are the steps?
$19 million
Is available to Vermont?
is available to Vermont
Okay.
to fund eligible projects. We get it once a trustee is set by the court. And then that starts the process where then a beneficiary is assigned in Vermont, and then Vermont comes up with a mitigation plan which outlines how, with stakeholder input, we plan to solicit projects that will be eligible for that funding. And then those projects need to be approved by the trustee as meeting the intent of the mitigation fund, and then that money is available to implement those projects. And again, it will be looking at NOx reductions and cost effectiveness as part of looking at those eligible projects within these different categories.
I could have more questions, but it's committee time, not council. Can I follow up?
Sure, yeah, by all means.
So who would be proposing the plan? Is that a role that A&R is planning to?
That's a role that the Agency of Natural, we've been very involved in these settlement proceedings since this violation was determined, as far as working on the eligible projects and expanding the scope to be more suitable for Vermont as a beneficiary. So it has been considered that the Agency of Natural Resources would be the beneficiary, but that's something that needs to be officially decided.
So Aaron, when the trust is effective, basically all we need to do is submit a beneficiary certification form saying that we want to claim our allocation under the trust, and then as soon as that's established, the governor signs it, and then we're allowed to apply for the money. So it's basically just a basic, trustee beneficiary situation.
And then coming up with the plan.
Did they have to admit guilt for the settlement?
Oh, I believe they did, yes.
They did.
Which should help the state effort if the state decides to do something, I assume.
Yes. Except we're not seeking criminal penalties in the state of Vermont. We're not eligible to do that.
Okay.
So is the lawsuit that Vermont has against VW being handled by the Attorney General's office?
Yes.
Anybody else? Thank you very much, appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank
We'll
you.
probably have to follow up somewhere along the way, depending on where this goes.
Sure, if you have follow-up questions, we're happy to answer them, and we're happy to come back in to provide further details.
Thank you very much.
19 million?
Pardon?
Is it 19 million?
19 million, 3,000 type in 19 million.